Hey everyone, welcome to Replay Office Hours. I'm Cecilia. I will be hosting y'all today. I am the community lead here at Replay, so I spend a lot of my time working with our users, helping them to better leverage Replay, dig into some debugging, work on our documentation, examples. If you've ever emailed our team, I probably was involved in some way. So thanks for checking in. I'm just going to give it a few more, get a few minutes here. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Would be super interested to know just like where you're from, your name, and what your familiarity with replay is. And then we'll be getting started really soon. Looks like we have a couple people in here already. Hey, Dan. Awesome. So Dan's joining us as well. We do have some members of the replay team here. This is the first time that we are doing office hours via Twitch, but previously we were doing more of a meeting and we wanted to be able to kind of go out to a wider audience. And so yeah, so thanks for joining us on this journey, me especially, and we're excited to chat through today. So like I said, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, name, kind of what your familiarity with replay is, where you're from. And then just to let you know kind of what we're going to be talking about today. We do have an agenda, so let me just to kind of walk through what that's going to look like. We are first going to start off, I'm going to talk through kind of what are some recent changes that we've had at Replay. So if you subscribe to our newsletter, you get the changelog every week, which we kind of share new features that the team is working on. So if you haven't seen those, I'm going to go ahead and demo some of those new features for you, including our dark mode and our focus mode. Also going to talk about what's coming up soon. So we're going to have some roadmap insights, take a look at what we're working on now that's going to be coming out over the next couple of weeks. And there's also going to be definitely time for any questions. So if you do have any questions for the team about replay, anything debugging related, really, feel free to pop that in the chat. And then we're going to just do some live debugging. So I actually have an issue with replay. So we're going to be debugging replay with replay, which is something that I love to do. We do it pretty often, actually. We all use replay here on the team. So yeah, we're going to be digging into an example and kind of taking a look and seeing what we can find out and hopefully add some helpful comments for the developers along the way. So I'm just going to hop back here, double check and see if there's any questions in the chat so far. Oh, hi, Dave. Awesome. Thanks so much for joining. Oh, awesome. Yeah, Gideon's the best. Glad you got a chance to talk to him. And yeah, thanks for checking us out. And hopefully we can kind of show you how to use some replay with the examples that we have going on today. Yeah, and so I don't know how everybody else feels about debugging, but for me, it was one of those things that took a little bit of practice to get used to, not just with how to use debugging tools, but just the concept of how to approach problems. It's not necessarily something that they teach you. So that has been one of the fun things about since I joined Replay is creating articles, examples, videos around how to approach problems. And so if you get a chance to check out our replay blog, we have a couple of articles in there. I wrote one about debugging CSS, and I also wrote one about how I fixed my first replay bug with replay. So I'm actually going to go ahead and pop the link to our blog in the chat as well for those of you who are joining. So awesome. Cool, cool. Hey, Jason, first time chat. Nice to have you here. Great, great. So, all right, so we're a couple minutes in. I'm gonna go ahead and just give it one more second. And we are recording this too. So the nice thing about switching to Twitch is that we are going to be recording all of our office hours. They're going to be saved to our channel. And so if you have to hop off early or if you come in late, don't worry, you won't miss anything. You can always watch them from our channel here. And so if you haven't followed us yet, please give us a follow. That way you can stay up to date. We will be doing these every Friday. So that's, again, our weekly office hours with the team. So very cool. So I'm going to go ahead and again, I'll get started. And so the first thing I want to talk about is some of the recent changes that we've had here at Replay. So I'm going to switch over and I'm going to share my screen. So give me One second here, just to make sure that I do this right. All right, so hopefully you are seeing my replay library. Looks like it's coming through on my side. Let me just double check on Twitch. Okay, yeah, looks good. If anybody has any issues, again, hearing me or seeing my screen, just let me know. Feel free to just pop in the chat. Well, first thing that I wanted to show you is dark mode. So we finally have dark mode. This was asked about for a while, and our design team have been really diligently working on getting everything kind of from the big sections of the app all the way down to the little details. And so it is something that has been released this week. So if you do see any issues or spot any areas where it doesn't quite look right, please let us know. We love feedback from our users. But yeah, the team has worked really hard on this, and it's really exciting to see. I personally use light mode. That's just how I am. I use dark mode in my code editor sometimes, but it's not a very dark mode. But I know a lot of people out there, dark mode was a big deal. So to set that up, basically you just go to your replay library, which is app.replay.io. If you've ever logged into replay to view a replay, then you have a replay library. Even if you've just logged in order to view one and you haven't actually created one. Then you just go to your settings. So settings, preferences, enable dark mode, and there it is. So now not only is your library going to be in dark mode, but it's also going to be in dark mode when you open up a replay. So if we click here, we open one up, we can see that all of this is in lovely dark mode. Obviously, the application itself in the viewer is still going to be the same color that it was, which makes sense because you don't want that to change. But we can see here, all of our elements panel, our React tab, our network requests, even everything down to our sources has this really neat dark mode color scheme. So yeah, curious if anybody has checked that out yet. Has anybody switched over to dark mode? Yeah, I need light mode in the morning to wake me up. Yeah, I have like a really big ring light that I use, and that definitely wakes me up as soon as I turn it on. But the light mode helps as well. And awesome. So yeah, so this is dark mode. Definitely let us know in the chat or you can also always reach out to us on Discord. We have replay.io/Discord, that URL there in the bottom left corner of your screen. That will get you to our Discord. We work in public alongside all of our users. In fact, there is a lot of chatter about dark mode in our design channel. So if you go to our Discord and you check out the design channel, John, our designer, along with Gerald from the front end team and Jason, who's also here, our CEO, they talk a lot about all these decisions. And it's really kind of neat to get the inside look into how these choices get made, which colors we pick, how we approach design decisions. And you can kind of tell. So last week, when we released focus mode, which is what I'm going to talk about next, John, our designer, wrote a really long blog post around all the decisions that went into that. And so if that kind of stuff is interesting to you, which it really is to me, you can check out the design channel in our Discord and get kind of a behind the scenes look at all the thought that goes into it and the decision making. So yeah, so this is dark mode. I mentioned that the next thing that I wanted to show is our focus mode. So what is focus mode? All right, so we have a replay here in front of us, right? So this replay, if I go back to our viewer, this shows a divide by zero error with a React calculator. This is the React calculator example from the React docs. It's essentially just a mimic of the calculator app that you see on like a desktop. But this is my replay, and I start clicking here. I have a comment, and in replay, comments are linked to a moment in time. So we can see all this stuff here before is happening before I even start clicking in my calculator app. So if I play this replay, there's not a lot happening that's very interesting. And then even once I get to the point where I start clicking, I do 2 + 2 = 4, don't get an error, everything's fine. And it's not until I do 8 divided by 0 that I get my error. So this is where my error occurs. And again, I have these like helpful comments for myself that are attached to points in time. So I have the error is here. I start clicking here. And then when I go to DevTools, though, I'm outputting some things to the console. And so focus mode essentially allows me to narrow in on a certain point in time so that I can get rid of any additional like noise, clutter, anything that could be happening. So let me go ahead and just show you that here. So then I'm going to toggle back over to DevTools, and then just give me 1 second here. I'm just going to refresh DevTools. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, and so as I mentioned, in my console, I have a couple of things that I'm outputting. So while I was in the process of debugging this divide by zero error, I wanted to kind of log my click handler and the state. I wanted to log a couple of different things from my calculate function and my operate function. But this is showing everything. And as I just stated, my error doesn't even start until over here. So how can I just narrow in on a certain area of where I want to actually debug? So that's what focus mode does for us. So let's go ahead and you can open focus mode by clicking the icon here in the lower right hand side, and you hover over it, it's going to say start focus edit mode, and it's going to bring up this edit focus mode. You can use the left and right handlebars and the timeline to focus your replay. So as I start to drag this left side over, you'll see the viewer on the application change to reflect that point in time. And as I get to the interesting part here, you'll see in the console, things start to disappear. That's because I'm only going to focus in on the part that I care about, which is where I start clicking on the number 8. So again, you can see things in the console appearing and disappearing. You can see the DOM of our application changing because replay is a time travel debugger. It's all about what's happening at specific points in time. And in this case, I only care about what's happening at that point in time after I start clicking my 8 divided by 0. And again, on the back end too, we can also bring this up to just where the error occurs. And then I can either click the icon again to exit, or I can click anywhere outside of the window. And now we're focused in on just this area. That's the name focus mode comes from, right? So if I replay my replay, it's only going to show that part of the video. It's only going to show that part of the console. So yeah, so that's focus mode. And that was released last week, but I wanted to show it because it's a really, really big new feature for us. It's, I think, going to really help people use replay and how you work in there and be able to narrow in. So I can also see in my console, like I said, all of these are more helpful. So if we really even just care about this last handle click, I can rewind directly to that time. I can see what my state is. I can also fast forward here to my operation and my operation function. So awesome. If you have any thoughts about focus mode, feel free to pop them in the chat. And so like I mentioned, we have talked about dark mode, we talked about focus mode. The next thing that I want to demo for you is our object getters and setters. So this was also released this week. Essentially, this will allow you to see object getters and setters in a replay. So I made a different example here to showcase that. So I'm going to click over to this tab. And I'm going to make sure that we're outputting our logs here. And I'm going to go ahead and open up my file. So kind of a simple example that we've created here, but I'm going to walk through it. And let me know if you need me to make any of this bigger, if you can't see the text on the screen. But this is just a script file. I'm declaring a class of person. I have a constructor that sets their name, age, and city. And then I have a couple of defined getters and setters. So getters and setters are specific keywords in JavaScript that allow you to declare functions that will get properties and set properties of a class. And these can be really important, especially if you're using libraries like Vue, or any kind of other construct where you need to understand how properties are set on an object so that if something goes wrong, you can kind of identify what's going on there. And also to be able to see what the properties are at different points in time. You can do that automatically with replay, but this is helpful to be able to get context around what the potential getters and setters are. So In this example, I have my 3 getters, get name, get age, get city, and my 3 setters, set name, set age, and set city. I am declaring a new person of Jane here on line 28. I'm logging Jane, then I'm resetting the city. She's moved from New York to Atlanta because Atlanta is way better. that's where I live. And then I'm relogging Jane to the console. So I can see my output here, and I can see the object each time. But the thing that's new is there's 3 different ways to look at this. If I look at the output for this object, so it will automatically show me the getters. So get age, get city, and get name. And I can even click on them here, and I can see the output of that getter at this point in time. And that's the important part. It's at this point in time. So again, replay is a time travel debugger. So everything is about a point in time. So if I fast forward, I'm sorry, so that was Jane. If I fast forward here to Jane with Atlanta, and I do the same thing, get age, get city, get name, we can see that get city is now resulting in Atlanta. So that's one way to see what the potential getters are. So I can log my object to the console. I can also do it this way. I can just on demand log it using the console to evaluate that expression, and I can see the getters here. I can also do this with autocomplete. So if I do Jane and then dot, I can see all the properties. I can see the constructor. I can also see the getters and the setters here. So this is something where if I wanted to then reset a property using set name, set age, or set city, I could see those here using our autocomplete. And then the last place to view this is actually within the code itself. So I'm going to rewind here to this point in time. I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of that in the console so it's clear. And if I hover over Jane, I can see my object, and I can see the getters here. So I have my get age, get city, and get name. And the reason that it's only showing the getters and not the setters is because there's no value to be set at that point in time in the code, right? At this point, we have a value that we can get. There's nothing that can be set. If you do want to set, like for example, if I do Jane and then I use my autocomplete, and let's say that she moves again. So set city, oops, chose the wrong one. Set city, and let's say this time she goes to Houston. I can do that there. And then I can go ahead and do Jane again, and I can output, oh, here, sorry, I gotta fast forward. Fast forward, and I'm gonna go ahead and clear all the logs from the console here, and I'm gonna do Jane, set city, equals Houston, and then I'm going to go ahead and just log Jane again. And when I do, okay, so I can, so you can see here that it did output Houston here, but I can't actually change it because I'm locked at that moment in time where it's set to Atlanta. So, but yeah, so now you'll be able to see all the getters and setters from an object within Replay. If you have any questions or any feedback on that, please definitely let us know. Again, replay.io/discord. All right, so that has been like kind of a review of the changelog of things that we've been working on recently. I do want to show kind of how you can see what's coming up next. So one of the things that I wanted to show you is that we do have a public roadmap. It is in our docs. So if you go to docs.replay.io, in our contact us section, this is the same place where you can get the link to our Discord or GitHub and our support email. It's also where you can find the information about the office hours today. And then we also do have a link to our roadmap. So we can go ahead and click on that and open it up here. And you can see some of the things that we're working on in addition to the matching GitHub issue. So if you're ever curious about the timeline for certain things, kind of be able to see progress on the actual GitHub issue itself, you can check this out and take a look. You can also obviously always kind of take a look at our repos as well. So the DevTools is open source. So you can go to record replay /DevTools on GitHub, and you can see everything that we're working on. You can open issues, you can see what issues have already been open, and you can see any open pull requests. One of the things that I did want to showcase is that we are looking at more flexible layout options. So you can check out that pull request here. There's a lot of conversation around it. There's also, again, a lot of conversation around it in our Discord and the design channel. So if you do have any feedback or thoughts about the layout options within Replay itself, let us know. And again, this refers to being able to, for example, how you can drag panels, how you can show, you can hide your video, you can show your video, you can hide your editor, you can show your editor. There's a lot of things that you can do with Replay. You can, collapse and expand columns. You can move around the panes inside of a column here. So everything in Replay is very, very customizable. So you can kind of create your ideal workstation, your command zone, so to speak, for debugging. But we want to make sure that that continues to be useful and flexible for you. So if you have any feedback, let us know. So I'm just going to check real quick and see if there's any questions in the comment. Oh yeah, so Jane.setCity Houston. So the way that it's declared, and we can see this here, like in our actual, we use set city equals Atlanta because it's an actual setter. Same thing that's happening in our constructor here. We're doing set city equals city. I think that's the JavaScript specific syntax, perhaps. If you do it a different way, it says that it's not a function. So I know I tried it. I tried it that way first too, and it didn't work for me. But yeah, so it is setting it and outputting it, but just not coming through. So, all right, just checking to see if there's any other questions in the chat. Awesome. All right, so that is the roadmap that I wanted to show so far, the layout changes, that we do have the Airtable. The next thing is I want to talk about something that we're going to be getting more information about next week in our changelog, but I wanted to just do a little preview kind of what's coming down. So with Replay, as you know, if you've used it, you can record bugs with the Replay browser. And so if you've seen that use case before, you open the Replay browser and you go to any website, you hit the record button, it records the entire browser session. That's how we get all of the code, the network requests, the events, everything that you see whenever you're editing a replay. This is really good for things like reproducing bug reports. If you come across a bug while you're in the development process, if you just want to validate application behavior, all of that. The other use case for Replay is recording automated tests. So if you've worked with automated tests platforms like Playwright, Puppeteer, Cypress, Selenium, you probably have encountered Flake. So Flake is when a test intermittently passes and then fails when nothing else has changed. So, or fails and then passes, either way. It's essentially where the results of a test can be different when nothing else has changed. And it can be really a painful experience for people who work in testing. I actually used to work at Cypress, so I know a lot about Flake, talk a lot about it. But one of the things when you do have a test that fails is understanding, where that failure came from. Is it Flake? Is it real? How can we debug it? And so if you record tests with Replay, you get that same debugging experience of having all of this information about the application at the time that the test was running. And so we are rolling this out, with a number of different test runners. This is going to be a very early stage, but we are able to, next week we'll be talking more about some options for recording Playwright tests with Replay. So if we go back to our docs, you can see in recording automated tests, we do have a recording Playwright guide. There's a video here that you can watch that has an example, and it also has kind of the setup information. But I wanted to go ahead and show a little example, very simplified, of how this could work. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my VS Code. So here I have a Playwright test, and it's coming from the Playwright docs, essentially. It's just creates two to-do items, and then it makes sure that it has two to-do items, right? This came directly from the Playwright demo. In order to record this with Replay, all you have to do is install the Replay Playwright config package, which essentially gives you access to Replay devices. It gives you Replay Firefox and Replay Chromium. Chromium's only available on Linux. But what this does is that instead of using the built-in browsers with Playwright, it will use the Replay version of the browser. So in our Playwright config, you import the devices from the Playwright config package, and you just use that here as Replay Firefox to set that. Once you've had that enabled, we can go ahead and record our test. So we're going to go ahead and npx playwright test to run our test. And it's going to go ahead and run the test. And once that is done, okay, the test passed. So that we used the replay enabled browser to record the test. Now we want to view it. So what we can do is we're going to use a package called, it's the recording CLI for replay. So replay recordings, and then we can do ls to view our latest recordings. But let's just go ahead and do view latest. So what that's going to do is it's automatically going to upload and open our replay. And that opened in a different window, so I'm just going to pull it over here. And this is the test that ran. So, you know, we can go ahead and click play, and we bought some cheese. We fed the cat, or at least we told ourselves to do that. And again, we have all of the access to the dev tools that we would have with Replay. So all of our source code, we have our elements, we can inspect at different points in time. And so you can imagine if you're recording tests in CI, you get a failure. Usually CI is a black box about understanding what's happening. And here with the replay, you'll be able to better debug those kind of failed tests. So we'll be releasing more information about this next week. It is very alpha, but if you wanted to check it out, get started, let us know if you have any issues or feedback. You can do so by using the links in our docs to get to that Playwright config repository. So any comments or questions on that? Awesome. All right, so that's roadmap. I did want to, we're about halfway through the stream, so I wanted to kind of pause here and see if anybody has any questions, any comments about any feedback. So this is our office hours, so you know, it is a time where you can let us know on the team what you've been working on, if there's anything new within Replay that you think is neat or that you have feedback on, please feel free to use that in the chat. You can also always join us in replay.io/discord, where you can chat along with the team. We all work in there. That's our home base. And yeah, so let me just go ahead and check the comments really quick here. All right, awesome. All right, so yeah, so feel free to add questions as we go along. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to actually dig into some debugging. So yeah, this is going to be fun. We're going to go ahead and start at taking a, okay, cool. We don't have a respect system settings for dark mode. Is that on the roadmap? So yes, that actually came up in our design channel yesterday, where we talked about if you have dark mode enabled in your browser, for example, we want to be we want Replay to be able to recognize that and automatically adopt those same settings, so that if before you go into your settings and before you check the box, you don't have to suffer through bright mode if you don't want to, or if that's difficult for you and you kind of have that setting in your browser. So that's something that we are aware of that has been discussed in order to be able to offer that in the future. Great question. Awesome. Okay, so let's do some debugging. So what we're going to be working on today is this GitHub issue here. So I opened this issue 2 days ago, found it while we were working on some things internally. And the issue is that the drop-down error for role change in team settings is not visible. So what does that mean? Let's go ahead and look at the replay. All right, so I'm opening up the replay. This is the replay that I recorded of the issue. As I mentioned, we do a lot of replays of replays, so this is going to be a little bit meta. But in our team settings, we have this kind of option to change the role type. And there's supposed to be a little drop down arrow that shows up when you hover over the user. And, we can see the same thing live, right? This is still an open issue. If I go back to my replay library, and I go to my team settings, the same thing will happen. Essentially, this little arrow doesn't appear. And so the thing is that there is an arrow. So we know that there's an icon. We just don't know why it's not showing up. So that's what we're going to be debugging today. I haven't really touched this at all yet, so this is going to be an adventure that we go on together. So bear with me as we do this. But I wanted to kind of do this for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's good practice. It's always good practice to debug. Number two, I think it's important to see what people's debugging processes look like. And number three, I think it's also good to know that there's bugs everywhere. Like every application has bugs. There's nothing to be ashamed of if you make a bug, or if you find a bug, or if you introduce a bug into an application. A lot of times I feel like that debugging is something that you're not really taught, or it happens in isolation. And at Replay, we really believe about having a collaborative debugging experience where you can ask questions, where you can say, hey, I don't know something, but maybe I can figure it out. And so that's why I really wanted to start doing these kind of streams with live debugging to show what that looks like. So my process is to document everything as I go along, so I don't forget things and I can make notes to myself. I'm a note taker. I have a legal pad right in front of me, actually. I love to take notes. But with Replay, I don't need a notepad because I can do it right here using comments. So I'm going to go ahead and find the part of the replay where we kind of see the issues, and I'm going to start to document some things. So right now I'm in viewer mode. There's viewer and there's DevTools mode. Viewer gives me this nice big screen to be able to see what's happening and to work with. And I'm going through the timeline. I'm in team members, and I want to add a comment here because I'm hovering over user, but we're not seeing the icon. So I'm going to go ahead and click here. I'm going to add a comment. This marker can be dragged around. So if I wanted to move it here, if I was moving something over on this part of the screen, I could do that. I'm going to leave it right there. So it's right next to the user. And this comment is tied to both this spot on the screen and this point in time on the replay. So it's a two-dimensional comment. And we're going to say here, hovering over a user role. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and, okay, so now I want to show, I just clicked on something there, right? So replay will show all the user events. So we have the navigation event where I first navigated to the site, and then we have all of my fun clicks here. And we can click on any of these to navigate to those points in time and see what the screen looked like. This is the one that I'm interested in here because I'm actually clicking on user in order to bring up the menu. So I'm just going to add a comment here too and say, click on user role to bring up menu. And the reason that this is a bug is because I didn't realize that you could click on it. The first time that I did this, I was like, oh, there's no way to change the user. Because that drop-down arrow is missing, I just, from a UX perspective, a UI perspective, figured that it wasn't possible. But when I clicked on it, I realized that, oh, you can. And we can see here that the menu appears. But every time I hover over, there's no drop-down. So I want to just note one more spot is right here. I'm hovering again, and there's no arrow. So hovering again, no arrow. Okay, so I have that documented. So now if I was, for example, like just an end user and submitting a bug report, or if I was on a QA team doing manual QA and I encountered this and saw in my requirements list that there's supposed to be an arrow there or an icon there, and it's not there, I could use this process that I just did in order to generate this replay for the people on the team and say, okay, this spot, this spot, this spot, this is where you need to focus on, this is where you need to look. So yeah, so like that from there, I could go ahead and click on share and copy the link and share it with my team. And so now I'm going to pretend that I'm on the receiving end. So it could be the same person that does the recording and the debugging, or it could be two totally different people. In this case, it's me, just like how I have two members of the team here on my test team. There's also two members on this debugging team. So that's what we're going to dive into next. So if we click on over to DevTools, we still have our comments, which again are linked to those points in time. As I click through them, we can see the viewer change. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start with elements because this is a UI, like a very visual bug. And so I'm going to go ahead and start with that. So to give us more room, I'm going to hide my editor. And I'm going to make this nice and big so I can see my HTML elements and my CSS rules. And then I'm just checking the chat. Okay, awesome. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for handling the chat. Okay, and so this is the HTML DOM tree. These are all of our CSS rules. If you click on this icon here, that opens the inspector or the picker mode essentially, which allows you to kind of zero in on a certain element on your DOM. Other thing you could do is you could search HTML. So if, for example, I knew I was looking for an icon, I could search for icon, and that's going to bring up the parts in our doc that have that mention. If I knew of a certain class type, let's say like if I knew something was to be like a hover class, it would zero in on those. But let's go ahead and just do this with the picker. And let's go ahead and zero in on our user here. All right, so it's going to find us. I'm going to go ahead and collapse the comments too, just to give us some more room. Again, everything here is draggable and adjustable. And let's go ahead and see what's happening here. So here we go. So there is an icon here, and it's an expand more icon. It exists. But as we can see on our CSS rules that are being applied to it, it has an opacity of 0. So we cannot see this icon. So yeah, let's go ahead and make a note of that. Let's start there. Let's just start there. So I'm going to go ahead and bring my comments pane back up. I'm going to just add a comment here and say, expand more icon exists, but has class opacity 0. And this is Tailwind, which I am not super familiar with. So we're going to work on this together, which is setting opacity to 0, as we can probably imagine. Okay. All right. So we know why it's not visible, but I feel like it's not just a matter of setting opacity to 0, because we also have, I'm just going to expand this even more to look at the entire element, all the classes. Okay. Okay. I'm going to add another comment. I'm just going to reply to this one here, because we can see here that there's also a class group hover opacity 100. Oops, 100. Okay, so I am assuming from, again, don't know Tailwind too much, but I did some Bootstrap back in my day and have a sense of what some of these classes probably mean, is that there is something set up to where when you hover over this, it's supposed to override that opacity of 0 to that opacity of 100. So let's see if we are hovering. So let's go ahead and I'm just going to do the pseudo elements here. So we can also see all the pseudo elements that are going on as well. I'm going to go ahead and minimize those again. And I'm going to go ahead and go back and just confirm that yes, right now we are hovered over and it is not appearing. So I'm just going to add that comment here, hovering over user role. There is a group hover class, but opacity is still at 0. All right, and again, I like to document everything as I go through because it is it just helps me kind of keep track of where I am, especially if I'm working on something that I'm not familiar with like Tailwind. So let's go ahead and go back to our element here. I clicked outside of it, so I lost it, but it's super easy to get back to it with the picker. And we're taking a look again here. So our opacity is set to 0. Oops. And then I can see that we do have the material icons class, and I can see that it's going to be this. Okay, so I'm not super familiar with this like group concept where it says group hover, like what that means. So I'm just gonna open up my Google, group hover, and okay. Yeah, so I was looking this up a little bit, but it's kind of like not super familiar with it. Okay, so group hover and then group goes above it. That's right. Okay, so we can see here that we have our group hover and we have group right here, which is a parent. Okay, so let me go ahead and add another comment there. And we're going to say group is in parent div. Okay, so our syntax looks right. We should be hovering over it and it should be changing the opacity, but it's not. So the next thing that I like to do is try and understand like what working looks like. So when I know something's not working, I try to understand what working looks like and then what could be different. So I am curious if we're using this, like I was curious about like if we're using group hover elsewhere. So let's go ahead and search, and let's see where else we're using it. So this is this search brings up search in files. So you do have a couple of search options. I'm going to go ahead and show my editor again. So we can search full text, you can search for a function, you can search for a file. I did search full text and I searched group hover, and I can see this is where workspace member opacity 100. This is where we're setting that value. Okay, so let me go, if I click on this, it takes me right to the line in my source. So I didn't even need to like look for it, it just pops it right back up. And I'm gonna go ahead and comment here that this is where we're setting that. So we can see expand more. And we have 6 hits. So I'm going to say this is where we set the class group hover opacity 100. Oh, that does not look right. Opacity dash 100. All right. Okay, and then it has some logic here about hide arrow. So, okay, yeah, I think I remember this one. I'm going to go into React because this is a React application, and we can see here that our function status hide arrow equals false. So I want to see if that's like still true. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and log to the console. Hide arrow. So what I'm doing right now is called a print statement. And just to kind of back up a little bit here, on this line, I can see that this line hit 6 times when I hover over it. That means that this line of code executed 6 times within the context of this replay. And so I am able to click on the little plus icon. And what that does is it logs each instance of this line, each time that it happened throughout the recording to the console. And by default, it just logs the name of the function that we're in, and it logs the line of code. But we can also log variables if they are in scope at the time. So if we edit this and we change this to hide arrow and hit save, okay, so this is outputting every single instance of this. And so You can see like the very, very beginning. This is probably, it was true, but then every other instance here, it's false. And so hide arrow, and we can also hover over it and see the value, is false. So we should have this group hover opacity 100. So that makes sense. And actually that makes sense because in our element, we wouldn't see that group hover opacity 100 class if hide arrow was true. And the reason we know that is if I go to admin, which is the other like user type up here, and I click on that element, and I inspect it in my elements panel, I can see that this icon does not have that group hover class. It just says opacity 0, and that's it. And if I go to my React tab, so just again, kind of tracing my knowledge here, and I'm just hovering over the different React components to find which one correlates with our little users here. Okay, so our admin, I don't see a, let me see, maybe it's this one here. Okay, I don't see hide arrow. And then, let's see, that's the icon itself. Okay. Let me see. Hide modal. Hide arrow. Okay, so this is for our admin, which we cannot change the role. Hide arrow is true, which means that we're not going to see that group hover class. And then here, we don't see that. That was on the E. And then on the E here, we don't have that same prop. So hide arrow is false. So that's why, so that makes sense. So the class is there, like it should be. The logic from the JavaScript is applying properly, so that's not the problem. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and add a comment here just to note that and be like, hide arrow is false, so class is being applied correctly. Okay. And the next thing I want to do, like I said, is try and see where else that we're doing, if we're doing this group hover like anywhere else and if it's working. So group hover, we also have opacity 100. This is like our bundled code. Looks like we have another spot here. Let me try. Okay, so we don't have any hits there, but just to look at the syntax, here we have opacity 0, group hover opacity 100. So the syntax does look a little bit different. We're not using the class names function that we were using on the other one. So, but there's not really a way for me to see if this is working or not, but I'm gonna go ahead and just add a note there just in case and say also using group hover opacity 100, oops, here. And then going back to my search, here's another spot. Okay, interesting. So this one is using the class names function, but it's using a different type of logic. So it's expanded question mark opacity 100, group hover opacity. And so I'm just gonna, this one does have hits. So I'm just gonna go ahead and add a comment here too. Also using group hover here. Okay, so we know that the class is being applied appropriately. The syntax on the group is correct. We have the group above it, the parent div. We see it used a couple of other places, but it's using a little bit of a different syntax, so that could be an issue there. we're able to narrow down a little bit as to where exactly it is going. So from there, we'll be able to hopefully understand why that opacity is not being overridden, why it's still showing up as opacity of 0 on the icon. If anyone is familiar with Tailwind and has any advice here, that would be helpful too. But so far, I think we're in the right direction. The next thing that I want to take a look at, though, is to, okay, yeah, so like I said, this privacy and the recording options drop down. It looks like this only hit once here, like when it first was loading. And I'm not able to jump. Okay, so recording options drop down. This is line 71. And if I fast forward here, I'm not able to see that for sure, but I do know what part of the application this is. So I'm actually curious if I go back here. So what's happening is, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and just open this up and inspect. This little icon is like another, this is the recording options. And so we can see that this has the same group hover opacity 100. And that does appear to be working. So it's working in this spot, but not in the other spot. So I'm going to add a comment there too. And then so I'm going to add so let's go and save that, add a comment here and say verified this icon does appear on hover using same group hover opacity 100. Oh, I keep hitting that instead of class. Okay, so we can see here that they're using a little bit of a different type of logic. Another thing I want to check and see is the group syntax here. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to go back to my little user element. I'm going to go ahead and minimize this. Oh, wow, we're getting close on time. Okay, so I just realized what time it was. But so I want to just do like one other thing here, just because I'm like deep in this bug hunt and want to check it out some more. So the only thing that I want to compare, right, is the difference between the classes that are here, where we can see that, where we know that it's working, and the classes here, and see if there's anything that's kind of different. So we have opacity 100, opacity 0, and then select none, leading none, text XL. So I'm wondering if maybe it's one of these other classes, like select none, leading none, that could be affecting it. Because it could be that something, one of those two. I'm not quite sure what those classes do, honestly, but it could be, I see them here, I don't see them here. And again, I'm trying to see a difference between what does working look like, what does not working look like. So I'm just going to add one more comment. I'm going to comment on everything and just noting that difference. So I'm going to add a comment here, and I'm going to say expand more icon also has classes select none and leading none. Oops. May be related, question mark. These do not exist in working hover opacity icon. Okay, so feel like we have 4 minutes left. Okay, so I'll wrap it up. We did make some headway. We were able to narrow in on where the class was being applied. Well, first we understood, we could see that opacity was 0 right off the bat. That's why it's not appearing. Then we traced that down to understand where the classes were being applied. We were able to do that by searching the functions for that class name and seeing in the React code where that class was being applied within our workspace members component. From there, we were able to track the state in order to confirm that hide arrow was appropriately setting the right class. And we also could see that because the group hover class is showing up on the DOM. We were able to see other instances in our code base where we're using that group hover. And then we were also able to kind of maybe note what's different, what may be causing the problem here. And so that's my debugging process. Oh yeah, it says here in the comments, check that your div class group has the proper height. Maybe it's not hoverable because the height is 0. Oh, okay. That is a really, really good point. Again, don't know too much about CSS, but I'm just going to go ahead and check that and add a comment. So I do see that line height is 1. Okay, this is where the group is. And we can go to layout, and our layout will show us like our box model here. And we can see the line height is 20. We can see that we have like 20 pixels here. And we can also see here, this is like, again, within the same group. That's also interesting. We have the group, then we have the span, which doesn't have the group hover. And then we have this. So that may, I don't know if that's related. A group hover, I'm not super familiar with it. But that could also be interesting, that because the example that I like pulled up has group hover over both spans. So I don't know if that's related or not. Again, just kind of noting that as well. But yeah, so I could also add a comment as well here. Also check proper height to make sure it's hoverable. And I'm going to put a little shout out here. Thanks, Moinax. Awesome. All right. So yeah, so we made some progress on here, added a lot of comments. Hopefully we'll be able to pair with, you know, this is helpful for the designer, for the front-end engineer that's going to be working on this issue. Hopefully this kind of gets us to the right direction. But yeah, so that's an example of my debugging process. Again, it's not, you know, everyone kind of approaches it differently, but my process, I really try to follow that steps where I isolate the issue, I narrow in on where it's not working, try to understand the behavior that is resulting, the behavior that's actually like rendering that, find out what working looks like, compare it to what's not working, and hopefully from there isolate the root cause. So yeah, thanks so much for joining our first replay office hours on Twitch. And yeah, I hope that you had fun. I think this was fun. It went by a lot faster than I expected. Next week, we are going to be doing the same thing at the same time. So we'll be talking about the changelog, roadmap insights, bring questions. If you have a replay that you'd like for us to debug together, feel free to send it our way. Hop in the Discord, send me a DM with a link. I'm happy to go through this process and work on it live. Otherwise, we have plenty that we can work on of our own replays as well. So yeah, thanks again for your time, and we'll see you next week. Cheers.